Hi, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with the Business Next Door. Thank you for joining us. I'm Anne Morello. I'm the Communications Lead at Nextdoor Canada. If you're not familiar with Nextdoor, we are the neighborhood app, and we're on a mission to ensure everyone has a neighborhood they can rely on. I think we can all agree that at the core of every neighborhood is its local businesses. They are the heart of the community, and now more than ever, it's vital we do everything we can to support them. Along with our amazing partners at Square Canada, we put together a 4-part conversation series dedicated to small businesses. So today, thanks to our partnership with the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, we're bringing you our second conversation focused on small businesses with mighty hearts. To kick things off, I'd like to introduce our incredible moderator, entrepreneur, connector, podcaster, champion for women in business, and the manager of strategic partnerships for the only Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, Joella Almeida. Joella, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Really nice to meet you. And I'm super grateful to have a wonderful panelist of women today that I'm really excited to introduce you to. So starting with everyone on the corner, I will start with Pratna. Pratna is a managing director at Maple Leaf Angels, and it's Toronto's most active network of high net worth individuals investing in emerging entrepreneurs in the Canadian tech ecosystem. Pratna brings together engaged investors with early stage and seed companies, enabling innovative companies to grow and realize their full potential right here in Canada. Next, we have Tasha Tringal. She is the freelance designer and graphic designer specializing in branding and logo work, typography, layout, and illustration. With a unique background in both design and art, she faces problems with creative solutions. She's also had design positions at some of Canada's leading organizations like Slap Travel and Freshie. We also have Eamon Juji, who is the founder of ShiftRight Consulting. Eamon is the founder and managing partner of ShiftRight, a human capital consulting firm with a passion for change. She's helped global Fortune 500 organizations and public sector firms make sustainable change a reality. The ShiftRight philosophy is grounded in the belief that change done well is change made easy. Their past clients have included Loblaws, Shoppers Drug Mart, Sears, Suncor, and Petro-Canada, Talisman, and Manulife. The next exciting entrepreneur we have is Amy Nugent, and she's a former swimming teacher. Amy and her co-founder, Kyle Oliver, are on a mission to help the world learn to swim by providing private swimming lessons that are affordable, accessible, flexible, and effective. At Propel, they build technology that helps swim instructors leverage their experience to better serve their communities as recreation entrepreneurs. They also connect thousands of swimmers and instructors across the country while providing underutilized pools for them to have lessons in, creating an entirely new personal swim instruction industry. And last but not least, we have the wonderful food entrepreneur, Melanie Ang from Backcountry Walk. Melanie is a marine biologist turned food entrepreneur inspired by her love for cooking, her graduate studies in sustainability, and her passion for outdoor adventures. Melanie recognized that there was a need for more eco-friendly, diverse, and nutritious food for the outdoors. She founded Backcountry Walk, a food manufacturing company that creates dried vegan meals in 100% compostable bags. Just add hot water, 15 minutes, and enjoy. So, starting off the panel today, I am going to not avoid the obvious. You know, we've all gone through the challenges that the pandemic has brought on. And so everyone has had to shift and pivot in the past 3 or 4 months, sometimes with absolutely little to no warning. So my first question is going to be to Melanie, Amy, and Eamon. What do you think the future will bring, and how have you adapted, leverage your existing customers or networks to help your business survive and thrive? We'll start with Melanie, then Amy, and Eamon.
Perfect. Thanks for the question, Joella, and thanks for the opportunity to participate in today's panel. I think if I could look back in time and go back to January or February and look at COVID-19 and the way the pandemic has affected my business, it's changed a lot. I would say before the pandemic, our revenue sources came probably majority 80 to 90% from doing shows and events, and that has significantly changed over this past year, going a lot to an e-commerce and online platform. I think a really big one for us is just being able to connect with our customers and keeping them informed through the process. I think a lot of local customers want to support local businesses, a great example with this panel. And so I think, communicating with our customers and really noticing that shift towards the online platform has been a really big one for us.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, when we built our platform, we were in the aquatics industry, and we recognized early on that there were already things that could be improved, and we really believe that learning on a one-to-one or a private kind of basis was actually more effective, and in the long term more cost effective. And so I think that when the pandemic hit, we actually had a bit of an advantage because we were only doing private lessons. And so the shift away from group activities was obviously played into our benefit. And, I feel like everyone is going to be very conscious moving forward into the new year. It's not just physically conscious, but just conscious of everything in their lives and in businesses and how we interact with each other. And so with COVID, what we did was what Melanie said, everyone wanted to stay informed, and that was our first priority. Like, where can we get credible sources so that our users could feel confident where they are right now and where we will go in the future. And one of the things that we did was, actually kind of custom built PPE for our instructors, because safety was obviously of huge importance to us. And so we built these these full face snorkel masks that protected, not just the instructors, but all the swimmers that were taking lessons with us. And that's how we've actually been able to remain in business and stay operating this whole time. And it's actually been kind of it's been an interesting experience, as I'm sure everyone feels the same way.
Eamon, how about you?
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. First, thank you for the opportunity to be part of the panel. It's super impressive to be part of the panel with such incredible women. So thanks for that. And so I think in terms of how COVID affected my business, because we're sort of in the professional services consulting area, all of our work is generated through project-based work, and we tend to be involved in large multi-year project engagements with relatively large companies. One of the things that affected us with the pandemic was that we were heavily situated at the oil and gas market, and as we all know, watching the financial markets, that was the first area that was most heavily hit. And so what ended up happening is a lot of our long-term contracts within that particular sector basically took a back end as a result of them focusing on just keeping the lights on and really paring back on what they were investing in when it came to non-essential things. So from an entrepreneur perspective, and particularly in a startup, that was incredibly challenging to sort of react to. But I think part of what I learned through it was a couple of things. I think you always have to listen to your gut instincts. So I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, even prior to the pandemic, we had this list of things that were strategically important. One for me was to diversify our industry foothold and get into other industries as well. A lot of those things can easily sort of slide to the back end when you're very heavily focused on just getting the job done and day-to-day management and deliverables, right? And so I think for us, part of the pivot was strategically moving towards starting to do a lot of the activities that we knew we needed to do, such as increasing our brand presence in other industries. And as we started to do that and increase our brand elevation, we were able to successfully pivot into the financial sector, which has actually been doing incredibly well at the moment. So that's been really cool. And then the other piece I would sort of add to, because you were asking about the trends that we see in terms of the future of work. So one thing that's been really interesting for me to see, being a startup organization, but working with organizations that are much, much bigger, I think part of what you see is the similarities. So as a startup, we have the agility and the sort of mobility to respond quickly. But a lot of what we face in terms of, what's the right decision to make and how do we choose the right strategy is the same that the larger organizations are facing. It's just that they have the resources. So what I did notice just from an interesting point of view was there were a lot of peers in the industry that we stopped looking at each other as competitors and more so as collaborators. And I think you could see that across different industries as well.
I'm going to take that same question and rephrase it for Tasha and Pratna, because Tasha and Pratna both interact with more entrepreneurs than the rest of you and have it from a different angle. So for Tasha, because you represent so many other companies, what do you have any thoughts on what you think the future will bring and how, some of your customers have adapted or leveraged to find existing customers? Something that Melanie and Eamon and Amy touched on was, that important positioning of the branding voice. And then Pratna, if you could elaborate on how some of your portfolio companies have addressed that and have had to adapt and leverage either their existing customers or try and find new markets, kind of like what Eamon just mentioned. Tasha, do you want to go first, and then Pratna can follow?
Sure, thanks, Joella. So what you guys were saying with brand voice is really key. I was doing I'm still a freelancer, so a lot of tasks kind of come my way, and the scope is quite big for projects. So one of the things that I've been really working on narrowing down and talking about with customers is let's focus on the thing that's going to make the biggest impact for you right now, since this is a pretty desperate time for a lot of companies. Let's figure out what's going to make the most impact and focus on that and grow that part of your business, which for almost everyone is brand voice and positioning. I think kind of pre-pandemic, sometimes that got put on kind of the back burner and was a supporting element for a lot of companies. Because sort of like what Eamon was saying, actually, when things are going well, it's hard to focus on the things that are going to push forward in the future. But now that we have had a chance to sit back, and a lot of companies have all these challenges and thought, how can I move forward next time something unpredictable like this happens? Having a strong brand identity and brand positioning is what's going to set you apart, especially online with the full digital future, when all of your competitors are on the same page as you. Everyone is showing up on the Google search next to you. Someone's always going to be doing it cheaper. Someone's always going to be, more convenient, faster shipping times, whatever. So you need to really focus on what's going to make people come back to you. Why are they willing to go a little bit out of their way to get your product or your service?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I love everything I've heard so far, and so happy to be here. Thanks for the question, Joella. So I have two examples for this, and a lot of it touches upon what the ladies have mentioned here. One is we had a company in the travel industry. Obviously, travel has been decimated during this period of time, and we saw more than ever the value of leading with empathy in this industry, because no one expected a rebound or expects a rebound still for a period of time. So this company that I'm thinking about, they're Montreal-based. Their first impulse when the pandemic hit was to check in on their partner companies. Everyone was struggling with lost revenues as a result of what was happening, and so they worked with them collaboratively to look at unique ways to stay engaged. So they launched local community support, outreach, volunteer programs, so further strengthening such that the moment restrictions loosened, they're top of mind and you want to continue working with an organization like this. Another thing that we saw was, the topic of a pivot has come up quite a bit. And it's important, I guess the biggest takeaway that I took from all of this is that, especially during times like a pandemic, it can cause huge shockwaves to entrepreneurs. It can be hugely questioning, and you can go through a lot of existential periods as to what your core is, why are you here, etc. The important thing is to not feel paralyzed during this period of time, and then I've seen some entrepreneurs in effect just decide not to deviate from a certain playbook because of the environment. But what we've realized is there is still value in being creative and experimental with just a portion of your opportunity pool, because in essence, everything is being redesigned or restructured or re-engineered. Customer discovery as a concept is just turned on its head. You no longer have your regular sort of channels that you go through, and unless you push yourself a little bit more, it's going to be challenging, I think, to come out of a period like this stronger than you were before.
Wow, thank you. I saw everyone nodding their heads and agreeing. So I think everyone has had some element of that experience in the past few months. And so coming back to that, then I think none of the audience would probably know about some of the challenges or options you guys as entrepreneurs have considered. So again, starting with the same sort of structure, what were some of the options you considered, as you faced the new challenges brought on by COVID? Melanie, Amy, and Eamon?
Hi, perfect. I guess I'll start first. Lots of challenges that I could probably take an hour to go through, but I'll save you guys. I think a big one for me, especially in the food industry, was our supply chain. I think relying on certain, partners to supply our raw materials so that we could do we do our own in-house manufacturing and then mail out the final product. And so that supply chain being disrupted, as we know, in March, April, May, that really put a huge pressure on our ability to manufacture product and as a result be able to distribute product. This summer, as we were mentioning, because travel was not allowed, a lot of people were exploring their local trails and backyard. And for Backcountry Walk, where we supply dehydrated backpacking food, that was a huge surge for us this summer in our sales. And so having that pressure on our supply chain, not being able to produce enough product, really translated into the pressure that I felt as an entrepreneur, as well as my team. And so I think a lesson that we learned here was really to diversify, not just in the sales channels that we pursue, but also in the supply chains. Just because you have one or two different suppliers that work in the past doesn't mean that is a solid plan for the future. Today, it's COVID. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? So I think constantly diversifying and looking for opportunities.
Awesome. For us, just to give a little bit more backstory on how what our business actually is. So we partner with hotel pools, and what we do is we open it up to qualified independent swim instructors to have admission to the pool so that they could teach private lessons. And so, you go on the website, you get to see which hotel pools are available and then see all the instructors that are listed and be able to choose an instructor based on your preferences. And so when COVID hit back in March, when everything went on shutdown, the challenge was we could not operate, period. All the hotels had shut down, at least the pools had shut down for sure, and they were running on a skeleton crew. And so we've got, the hotel pools, we have our instructors, and then we have our clients who are our swimmers. And so we had, challenges on all three of those areas. And so with the hotels, it was like no questions asked, you just shut down, canceled all the lessons, did all the refunds, no problem there. We actually were proactive about it, and instead of waiting for the hotels to tell us that they're going to shut down, we just wanted to do our part for the community and make it safe, and so we actually shut down ourselves. And so as they started to ramp up and slowly open again, we knew that pool capacity, or just number of people in the space was really important. And so we actually built a reservation system for them to use that allowed their guests to book pool space as well as play with ours, so that we would never run into overcrowding or double bookings. And so we would actually adhere to the government bylaws in terms of how many people were allowed to be in the space. And so that was the challenge that we solved with the hotel side. With the client side, we just kept them informed, regular updates on what's going on. And then with our instructors, we built these masks that would be ready for when the pools do reopen, and we sent them to all active instructors, no cost. We're just like, we know we have to do this to keep you guys safe. And our clients were very happy about that. Reopen. And so once everything slowly started to reopen, we were ready to go. And it's been yeah, that's kind of the challenges that we face and how we overcame them.
Okay, so in terms of the challenges we faced, as I mentioned, because we're in the consulting market and our engagements are so project-based, the way that we cost is hourly. So it's basically an hourly provision of a rate for a particular resource, which was definitely something that I had to rethink when the pandemic hit. Part of what that meant was I had to sort of test the viability of the model that I was presenting to the market and consider alternatives. And one of the things we came up with is, so we offer 3 main service lines: change transformation, organizational redesign, and leadership development. And probably one of our most popular lines is the change transformation piece. So what we decided to do with that is we started to offer essentially a way to commoditize our service as a product, and we provided change in the toolbox, which is essentially a step-by-step guide that we were offering our clients that would allow them to internally develop the skill set and walk them through what are the key things you need to do depending on the size of the project that you're engaged in. The reason I said this was a mindset shift is oftentimes you have to think about, are these pieces of the core differentiator of my business that I'm giving away? And I think when you're hit in a situation like this, it comes back to empathetically leading, as Pratna said, and trying to find a balance of what's the right thing to do, both for yourself and your business, but equally for your clients. And so I think when we were weighing those two out, we recognized that working with our clients through this difficult time and working with them in an agile and flexible way that would allow us to say, hey, we understand that this is not the optimum time to be able to bring on an entire team, and we want to ensure that this project is successful internally. So what can we do to work with you in a collaborative way? And so we piloted this with one of our clients that was very willing to work with us, and we learned a lot together collectively to be able to provide a product that allowed them to autonomously really start to develop their internal skill set, which was really a testament to good service, right? They don't need you as much anymore. So that was one thing we did. And what I found is it actually really just strengthens the relationships you have when you're able to help your clients in that way, similar to what Amy was saying. And then the other piece that I would add is we also started to think about, as I mentioned earlier, what we were starting to see is cross-industry collaborations and a willingness for different sort of vertical sectors to start to work together to come up with solutions, right, on things like PPE or innovation. So we were thinking, as a professional services firm, what is it that we can offer the market and our clients now? And so we launched our first ever podcast series where we were able to bring experts from different industries, and we started with legal because a lot of the questions we were asking ourselves were also questions our clients were asking in terms of, what does this mean for my employees? How do I ensure that there's a safe working environment for my employees? What are my obligations as an employer? Are they different if I'm hiring a subcontractor versus an employee? So we did a 5-part podcast series that allows us to feature some of our own network's sort of expertise, and also give content that we thought would be valuable at that time. And we did it across legal, retail, energy, obviously oil and gas, and we got a lot of great feedback from that as well. And I think that was a good way to sort of continue to have the conversations, even if it didn't necessarily mean that you were generating immediate business.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head to that because something that we've seen at the Women's Chamber of Commerce is actually a lack of enough legal resources. And it's something that we're hoping to tap into because, like you said, a lot of women, a lot of entrepreneurs, I realized that, they had to make these severe shifts and they didn't know what was the right thing to do, how to handle it. And on the other hand, a lot of product-based businesses were able, like, again, to point to Amy, they made their own mask. It's kind of incredible. So Tasha, do you have any examples of clients that you've seen, or what were the options you considered as you faced new challenges brought on by COVID? And Pratna, looking back, if this was, January 2021, is there any company that completely blew you out of the park this year in 2020 and how they faced their challenges? Sasha, you want to go first and then Pratna?
Totally. Okay. So companies that really changed the way they're doing. A lot of the focus, I think, for most of the people that I've been working for has switched a lot from kind of production and putting out new things, obviously because of supply chains, but also just because of slower economy and people aren't as interested in buying, and it's more about building up a name. So a lot of the people I've been working for have been switching to content-based strategies and keeping their name kind of at the top of the list, so that when things do come back up for a lot of companies, some of them are like, travel companies, not going to happen now or soon, but in other ways, like I worked with people who are doing presentations in schools and stuff, and that's coming back up again. So they're really focusing on laying out foundations similar to what you were talking about before, right? So connecting with people in other industries that benefit them. And then a big one is connecting with the communities that they either directly impact or directly sell to. Because when you can kind of help them, obviously, yes, you're helping a community, which is great, but also you're building up your brand's authenticity, you're building up your brand's trust and name recognition. And that kind of builds up loyalty, so that the next time things happen like this, or the next time that you as a company want to position yourself differently and try a new thing, you have so many people that are already kind of on board with what you do and see the potential in it, so they follow through. So a lot of it has been, just around communication that is more effective and more efficient and targets the people that they hope to work with in the future more than where they are right now. Like we're looking at how we can move forward and what industries you can move towards. Thanks.
So Joella, you're asking in terms of companies that we may have seen in January of this year that we think have just hit it out of the park.
No. If you were looking back on the year on like how some of these companies adapted to their challenges or faced them, kind of like the example you gave us of,
right,
the company in Montreal. Is there anyone that totally impressed you?
Okay, yeah, it's a good question. There are, I would say, a few common attributes that we've seen amongst a couple of companies. So number one, in the way they've approached this, we've talked about empathy and the value of keeping your key people happy and engaged. But number one is identifying that this is wartime. And then so with the founders coming to investors and just getting into that brainstorm mode that we've got to figure this out together, whatever it may be, decreasing costs, whatever you can do to increase runway, adjust your work environments, improve your cadence of communications. That was a large area, I would say, where some companies exceeded expectations, whereas others may not have. And that is communicating with your stakeholders, increasing those feedback loops amongst your customers, investors, employees. Then forecasting, financial forecasting, those that actually went to the books and started looking at what the next 6 months looks like, what the next 12 months might look like, and project out different scenarios. Here's a 20% probability, 40%, 50% of client collections coming through. And then another big piece, we saw a lot of aggressive activity from some founders that had started engaging in investor discussions pre-COVID, but were obviously stalled as a result of the pandemic, but really looking to go in and hone in on those relationships that have already been built. And I know, Amy, you could probably speak to some experiences there. So once we saw some founders sort of figure out initially what was happening, have open enough discussions, we then got into the stage of, okay, let's take a breath and let's plan forward. Let's strategize. What is customer discovery going to be like? Let's review our product offering. We had a company that was a product-based company in cybersecurity. They realized enterprises are not spending money anymore on these large solutions, at least for this period of time. So what they decided to do was instead, hey, what is your immediate pain point, your immediate need? Can I offer you services and generate 100 or 200K out of it? That might bring in a cash infusion for me, but has a limited burden on the client potentially. And what we also saw quite a bit of is people, and I think some ladies have touched upon it here, is expanding your customer segment. We saw companies that were selling to large enterprise actually move way further downstream, realizing that in the small to mid-sized businesses, huge opportunity because everyone's pretty much in the same boat and looking to support each other. So some movement, that's really what we saw in the second phase, where there was pivots, adjust to sales process, and looking at expansion opportunities. And then we got to phase 3, I think, where only some companies arrived. And phase 3 was really, okay, we've tried everything we have. Now we're not able to survive through this period of time. Let's either pause our operation, let's consider selling M&A activity, or let's start thinking about a broad enough shift that will just re-strategize everything that we've worked at. In terms of companies, if I think back to ones that have really stood out and come through this period of time, are ones that have done all these things, but also ones that are in sort of areas or markets where they realize, you hear the word COVID proof, it's thrown around quite a bit. And it's important to, I guess, understand, is my business model nimble and agile enough for me to move and shift gears if necessary? And going forward, am I building out the necessary reserves and the contingencies to weather through a storm like this? That's sort of the questions that we want entrepreneurs to be thinking of. And I would say those are really the good stories.
That leads us very nicely into the next question. And, a lot of these panelists here with me today have heard of these questions before they came on. So I know they've thought about it. So knowing what you do now, what would you do differently in January 2020 from a planning perspective? And really, what advice could you share with other entrepreneurs knowing what you do now? Because now you guys are all seasoned. You've gone through it, you've adapted, you've changed, you've pivoted. There's a lot of other women who are listening here today who, are going through this and still in the flight or fight mode. They're still like working through it. So if you had the knowledge of what was going to happen back in Jan 2020, what would you do differently? And I'll switch it up a bit. Maybe Amy, you could go first if that's okay, and then Melanie and Tasha. Yeah, you're muted. We'll wait for you.
Okay. So let's see, knowing what we know now, which I feel like is a lot. And, if we were to go back in January or planning future starting January, I think it is just keeping things really simple and going back to the roots of, being an MVP and just being able to navigate through any type of water, always water, puns intended, for our company. And I think, yeah, like anything obviously could happen at any given time, whether it's killer bees or it's COVID. And I think, just staying core to who you are as a business and as a company and really honing in on that. If you are, a service, like, what do your people need? And so I think just really planning for anything could go wrong and not everything is great now. And that's just how it's going to stay forever. And I think I'll just keep it simple like that. Just always have some type of contingency plan, and also on top of that, really like integrating yourselves into maybe be more valuable to your users, whether it's our hotels, our swim instructors, or our clients, that they need you in their lives. And so letting them know that, don't worry, we're not going anywhere. We might look a little different or whatever it is, but we'll still be around. I think that really entrusts, it gives faith and trust in your company and brand.
Perfect.
Me? Okay. I would echo Amy's comments, and what I would add to it is I got a really valuable piece of advice from my mentor, and she basically said to me, if you're working in your business, you can't work on your business. And I think as an entrepreneur, particularly when you're in the startup phase, it's often easy to lose sight of that. And so earlier when I said, I always knew strategically I needed to make sure that I was diversifying across different industries and, elevating the brand and doing a lot of the types of things that support the brand elevation. When you get very busy, it's easy to sort of kind of put that off to the side. But I think her comments it made me realize that you have to think bigger picture strategically. And even when you're starting up, I think it's important to anchor to what are your strategic goals for your company, and hold that vision, hold that vision. And what I would mean by that is don't lose sight of that, because when you started the business, you started it with an end goal, right? And I'm sure when you started it, you recognized it wasn't going to be easy and that you were going to have to go through a lot of different types of challenges. So the idea of thinking about the long-term vision and of course pivoting in the interim, but holding on to what that means for you is very important. And then just to echo my mentor's comments, I would say part of what she's trying to get me to think about is that long-term vision, so that you don't kind of get stuck in your growth and say, I can't do this yet because I'm focused here. So I think that long-term strategic planning is really, really important. The other thing that I would say is, learn from others. And I think that that's something that has been really great to see across the market. I think the willingness to share lessons learned from different people and to say, hey, we're in this together, but then to truly mean it, right? To actually share what's worked for people, how it's worked. I think that has been incredible to see, and I hope it continues, because I think it's allowed us to say, we can cross collaborate, and that doesn't mean that you're getting any less of the pie. That just means that we're strengthening that pie, really. So I think that has also been something that I took away from this experience, for sure.
Melanie and Tasha, do you want to chime in as well?
Hi, sure. I totally agree with everything that has been said. I think on top of all of that, one thing I would add is, I think in January, with COVID coming along, we're always focused on the negative. And of course, with COVID, there was a lot of negatives, but also recognizing that there were some benefits and there were some positives that came out of it. For instance, I think this webinar, if we were to have it in a non-COVID time, we might all be in person, and that might be restricted to people who are living in the GTA area. So being able to connect with all of you wonderful ladies and all the audience here today, so a wider reach, is something that I think earlier on in COVID days, just taking advantage of that. For instance, right now we're involved at Wise Space through York University, the Food Accelerator program, and we're based here in Ottawa. So being able to participate and tap into larger networks beyond your local communities is something that I definitely have taken full advantage of during COVID. And I think one additional thing to add there is, in the early days, we don't really know how long COVID was going to be. And I think taking care of yourself as an entrepreneur is something that I wish, we have a million things on the go, and this is definitely not the end of the journey. So I think always taking time for yourself and for self-care is something that I would really reiterate to any audience out there.
Well, I completely agree with that. I think COVID kind of showed us a lot of stuff that was really important that we weren't paying attention to, like as a society, as a community, as entrepreneurs. So looking back now, I mean, I want to be, first, I'm thankful, like I'm doing better than I was before. I've been able to take this time to pivot and to grow my company. But of course, so many things I would change. First of all, if I could plan for this, I definitely would have diversified. Like I relied really heavily on networking and on events. And meeting people in person, that was a really big thing for me, and it was working really well. So I never pushed myself to build an online community or really connect with people that way. And then the other thing that I think was really important that, came to attention because of COVID to me, but I think is just something that can help anybody anytime, is to trust your gut a little bit more and take a risk. So before COVID, like I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to use design to help people, and I was working with clients that were doing that, but I wasn't committed enough to drop everything else that wasn't moving that forward. So I think like back in January, had I known what was coming, I would have made that change sooner and focused more on the kinds of companies that I could work with and that would bring me towards my own goals as well. Because it turned out to be so great in that I got to work with hundreds of more, and they led to other cool people, and I made this cool community. So that would be my advice to most people. You know, diversify, make sure that you're not future proof, but like, you know, challenging yourself a little bit more and not just taking the easy routes, and take a risk sometimes in a way that you think you'll grow from.
Awesome. And then I guess that brings us to one of the last questions for the session, which is, you know, what impact have you guys seen that, you know, COVID has had on women, and how is this different from other business entrepreneurs? Or do you think it's same? Or do you have an opinion on it at all? Like, do you think, how do you think COVID has affected you personally as a woman entrepreneur? Melanie, could you go first, and then Tasha?
Sure, I can speak to my experience. I think for myself, I think taking on a lot of stuff, just as an entrepreneur and the founder of my company, you know, wanting to take care of things for my customers, but also for my team, and always taking on a lot. And I think COVID has really pushed me to get help for people in my community, from other entrepreneurs, and just to put it out there onto the community, to realize, even a panel like this, that we're not alone in our struggles. And I think especially because most of us are working from home and isolated, it doesn't mean that we're alone. And so I think a big one for us, and maybe as women entrepreneurs, is to really put the reach out there and to ask your community for support. And I think you'd be amazed at all the amazing women entrepreneurs that are out there that you can connect with.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I've been super lucky to work with KWCC, with Joella, because you meet so many different kinds of women and so many different kinds of businesses, and they're dealing with all these challenges that I, you know, didn't even think of before, that weren't really highlighted before. So I think that COVID has definitely affected women entrepreneurs more strongly than, like, more disproportionately than other demographics. And I see that in all of my customers. Like, a lot of my clients are women working on small businesses in mostly service industries, but it varies. And little things that you wouldn't have thought of, like responding to an email on time, is so much harder, because these women are also taking care of their children, taking care of all the household chores that can't get done anymore, and people are all home. It just really highlights a lot of the issues that I think all of us as women entrepreneurs, and particularly those who are taking care of families and stuff, deal with. And I like that it's made people a lot more understanding. I think there's a lot more patience towards it, and kind of acceptance of it in the workplace, is what I'm hearing from my clients. So I'm hoping that we can move forward with this. And now that it's really been shoved into everyone's faces and everyone has to deal with it, that's where the solutions start to come up, right? And that's why hopefully I can help support people as designers and give them that economic independence and the opportunity to help more women and help themselves in more meaningful ways, because it is going to take a lot to rebuild after this.
And Amy and Eamon, have you seen any differences, or do you think that, you know, COVID has, in your experience with your clients, and I guess Amy, with, you know, the people that are booking classes with you, have you seen there's a disproportionate impact?
Honestly, I haven't seen it too much, at least with our company and our business. But, you know, Tasha was saying there's lots of moms out there who are, you know, juggling so many different things. And I think, you know, being a woman founder, not saying that my two male co-founders are not empathetic at all. They're amazing human beings. But I think, I don't know, I'm just like on another level. And I think something actually I realized recently is, like, we talk a lot about sweat equity going into startups, you know, but you don't talk about emotional equity. And I find that with, like, every cancellation, every time I need to do something like that, like it hurts me just. And so at first I really burnt out from that, actually. And I was just like, oh, I just wish I could turn off my emotions. Life would be so much easier in business. But then I realized actually it's a huge strength, and I shouldn't shy away from that, you know. And, like, you know, you're right, leading with empathy is huge. And we are, you know, people, we're dealing with people, and that's where it really needs to come to the forefront. And so on top of that, yeah, like a lot of moms out there and trying to be as empathetic as possible, trying to go, out of my own way to make sure that they feel like they're being heard and taken care of. And that always comes back twofold. They always feel that appreciation. But yeah, I think that's what I've, at least myself, have experienced.
And Eamon, have you seen this experience as well? Do you have any thoughts to add?
Yeah, I think I would say similar to what the other ladies mentioned. Certainly, I have seen the impact of COVID on women. I would say, I've seen it generically on everybody, but what I've also seen come to the forefront is this ability to lead with vulnerability is what I would say. So I think where it's been effective is, with clients that I've worked with, it's been really cool to have Zoom meetings where it was, like showcase your outfit, which is oftentimes, formal at the top and your pajama bottoms at the bottom, but just that. Or there's one client that I work with that has actually baked in time for happy disruptors. So this is like your pet coming in to your room unexpectedly in a Zoom call, or your toddler running in. And I think those sorts of things have been great to see, because I think that is a part of everybody's lives, right? It's not that you go to work and then, you kind of stop and you have another life. We could do that, I would say, better before COVID, but now with it all sort of intermersed, it's been really great to see organizations that are stepping up to the plate, acknowledging it, doing things like, having 12 o'clock be a no meeting zone so that you do have the chance to get away from your computer, and really understanding that, the family life balance is important for mental health and productivity, and not seeing that as mutually exclusive. And so I think it's been incredible to watch that happen, to watch leaders step up to the plate and acknowledge the challenges that they have been facing, and to allow their teams to vocalize them as well, and to actually do stuff, to address it. The other thing I would say that's been really cool from a female entrepreneur perspective is, I would say that I've probably never networked as much as I have during COVID. And what's been incredible to see is just, a lot of different organizations, such as the Chamber of Commerce, coming up with these creative ways to connect women, to connect small businesses, and having the ability to profile your business in these sorts of events, and also just having the ability to talk through some of the challenges with like-minded individuals that are going through the journey has been a fantastic resource and support. And it's really great to see that. I think the government is also stepping up and recognizing the impact this is having on small businesses, and how critical it is to support the local businesses. So I think that it's really great to see action actually being tactically taken. And as a small business owner, I'm very, very grateful for that.
Amy, did you want to add something?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add to that, because I feel like it'll tie nicely into from Eamon's to what Pratha's going to say, because Pratha's such a great speaker. I found something that I've really noticed is that I feel like women are actually becoming more and more empowered, because I feel like we're kind of on, minus moms having more to handle, but everyone's kind of been put on the same playing field. So for example, if you're going out to networking events and you're trying to meet new contacts or new leads, for women it might be intimidating to approach men, and maybe vice versa. And so I feel like with the internet now, it's just like, no, you are just hitting everybody and you're connecting with whoever you. There's just no social person to person aspect that comes into play here. And so actually I've seen so many female entrepreneurs and women-led businesses just take hold, and it's just very, very inspiring to see. So that's something I've noticed with COVID.
Pratna, then on that note, how have you seen the women in your portfolio adjust during this time, and has it been different compared to other entrepreneurs that you usually interact with?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good discussion, Joella, and I would echo a lot of the points. mentioned so far. Across the board, I think with our female-led companies in our portfolio, we saw a couple of things and key themes that we've talked about already, you know, doubling down on your mission, walking the talk where you can, providing valuable resources, content, etc. to the communities. But then there's a take care of myself aspect as well, which becomes challenging for all the reasons mentioned, including, you know, juggling various priorities. So overall, I'd say the way these issues have been tackled doesn't vary greatly across gender in our portfolio. However, what I will say is there is tremendous amount of data that demonstrates an inequality in the impact to women compared to other folks. For example, there's a great organization based in Toronto by the name of Prospect that created this help list that some of you may be familiar with. And the objective with the help list was to support laid off tech workers during the pandemic. And so in a survey that they conducted, they saw 61% of those layoffs were underrepresented individuals. And so, you know, we take a step back as investors in the community and reflect over the role that A, we play, and B, the ecosystem around us and the government, you know, being a large player in all of this. So I think overall, while the federal government has no doubt earmarked dollars for these underrepresented groups, and we've come quite far, there's still ways to go, I think. During periods of crisis like this, you often find that diversity becomes a matter that is often disposable, be it government, be it corporate, and I think that really is the biggest issue. Policy responses are typically directed at entrepreneurs broadly and do not take much of a gender lens into consideration, which is why, you know, there's true need for work from organizations like CanWCC. I've certainly heard, not in our portfolio, but of entrepreneurs that we're meeting in the community who do not qualify for some of the government support. The basic programs that almost all entrepreneurs are going for, but many women-led businesses do not meet criteria. They're cautious spenders. Perhaps women don't want to take on debt. And are going through things in a little bit of a methodical or defensive approach as opposed to an offensive approach. And so I think it's shifting. There's a long ways to go, but overall the community is coming well together. You know, there's events like this. Investors, the narrative in the investor room is also shifting as people are realizing that, hey, it's not just about treating the entrepreneurs equally, but you do need to go that extra mile and support, or else you're not going to equalize the gap.
Yeah, I think that's such a wonderful tie-in to even the comments that I think Tasha and Amy made, which is, you know, there is this sweat equity and there is this other stuff that's happening behind the scenes, that these little nuances that haven't been highlighted before. And I think a lot of women entrepreneurs that we've heard from, you know, haven't even taken, I guess, the extra trouble to name themselves as owners of their business and, you know, put that in paper and make that legitimate, which eventually ends up being harder, being like hurting them when government grants come out and opportunities come out they can't apply for then because they've like waited on this for so long. But at the same time, like Tasha mentioned, it's forced, and like you mentioned, it's forced the communities to come together and say, okay, now we can't wait anymore. Like we have to act on this. We have to start. Let's go find a way to address these right now. Like even for Melanie, I think you talked about diversifying your supply chain, and I think before you were more likely to trust maybe just one supplier and just think like that's it, and sort of like that diversity expands to not just your customers, to your supply chain, to your partners, to who you interact with, to how you approach your brand voice, I guess. Well, that really brings us to the end of this conversation today, and I'm very grateful for all of you for joining us. Thank you very much. And I'm also really grateful to Square and Nextdoor for putting this together. So I will hand it back to Anne, who is, ta-da, on the screen now.
Hi, I'm back. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you for this awesome discussion. I have one last question for you all, if you'll take it. What can women do to support each other moving forward? Joella, I'm gonna give it back to you.
Oh dear, putting me on the spot. Well, we represent, you know, women entrepreneurs across the country, and I think one of the biggest challenges that we've seen is a lot of people's marketing budgets have been hit. I can't deny that. A lot of advertising budgets and marketing budgets have been hit. So, when you see opportunities like this, opportunities like some of the other panels that have been happening over the past few months, and you're learning about that women-owned business, I think, share it. It doesn't hurt. Like, that's the easiest thing that doesn't cost you anything. Like, I can't wait to tell people about Melanie's products, because I have so many friends that are going camping over the weekends, and like, where would you find, instead of KD, you have like Asian walk and roll, like in a bag. It's amazing. And then swimming instruction. Oh my gosh, I have so many moms in my community that like need something for their kids to do, and that's perfect. Tasha, I've seen her work with so many brands and women over the past few months. I've seen her interpret massive amounts of survey data and position it in a way that people can understand. The work that Eamon's doing, I think through Ella, is that right? Through the Ella Accelerator, I've also heard a lot about her even before putting this panel together. So I think it's like remembering we're amazing at mental notes. I'm not gonna lie, like all of us here are probably the best of the best, and know other women that are the best of the best at keeping those mental notes. So when you know of other women-owned businesses, I would say share it. That would be the easiest thing.
Thank you. Tasha, what do you think?
Yeah, I think support each other in ways that benefit both of you. So things like, if you have an Instagram following and you know someone who's doing something that aligns with you, share it, do it together. Take advantage of each other's resources, and just go look at what you have already before you try and expand, and see how you can use these tools creatively, and how you can take advantage and leverage all the things that you are lucky enough to have still, despite all this, and grow from it.
Eamon, what would your response be?
I would say very similar to the other ladies. I love the idea of sharing. I think equally what's been super supportive, Joella mentioned Ella, which is an accelerator specifically designed for women. I joined that basically, I did the application at the end of last year, not really knowing what a huge emotional support it would be, because here you have a contingent of women that are coming together, and we're able to candidly sort of discuss the challenges that we're facing. I think Amy put it really well when she talked about the emotional equity. I totally agree, and the ability to sort of be in a safe space and talk about what's not going well and what can we do, because I think as entrepreneurs, oftentimes you have this face of, it looks perfect with your branding and your social media, and, but what's going on behind the scenes often may not really reflect that same picture. So having women that are there, that you can turn to, that you can confidently sort of confide in, that are sort of walking the same journey, has been super helpful for me. And I think the idea of then sharing that knowledge with each other, and the wisdom and the insights and just the support is probably my key takeaway.
Very cool. Pratna?
Yeah, so in terms of what can we do now, I would say we're at such a unique point in time, and all of us here collectively as a group are fortunate. I think we have the ability to take a chance and take a risk. For example, you have two candidates in front of you, similar stories on paper, be it a customer, be it an employee, be it a supplier, be it a contractor. It's not the obvious choice, why perhaps less relevant experience, but do it because you're in a position, I think, to make a change. Hire that person, work with that person. I think we're part of this elite group as women entrepreneurs or business owners in 2020, not just surviving but thriving during a pandemic. I think we have the ability to change this with our small actions.
Thank you. Amy?
Yeah, I'll touch a little bit more on what Eamon said with connecting with people. Just think about where we were when we first started and how hard that was already. And now we have, this global pandemic to deal with. So there's a lot of, young women out there who are trying to start businesses. And I think that, offering a little bit of your time and advice and wisdom or, lessons learned will actually go a long way. For example, someone in an engineering course that sent me her elevator pitch, I was just like, I don't understand any of this. But, I just looked over it. It only took 15 minutes. I sent it back and she was like, oh, makes so much sense, you know, like, and so I think, you know, it made such a huge impact for her. And that was only like 15 minutes of my time. And I think that, you know, as entrepreneurs now, as women in leadership, you know, if we can give back, I think this is a great way to do it.
I love that. And last but very not least, Melanie, what would you say?
I think I totally agree with everything that's been said. I think paying it forward, and then also don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. Short and sweet.
Definitely. That's a good one to keep in mind. Well, everyone, it's time to wrap things up, but thank you so much to our incredible panelists for the insightful discussion and inspiring advice. A huge thank you to Joella for moderating this amazing conversation, and to our partner Square Canada for making this series possible. Our next conversation is taking place this coming Thursday, October 22nd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope you can join us again. And lastly, if you haven't already, check out the Nextdoor app or visit nextdoor.ca to tap into your neighborhood, either as a member or a business. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We look forward to continuing the conversation on Thursday. Hope everyone has a great day. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.